So I've been asked to summarize, like what this is, Nostradamus. She's going to tell us what the future is. Actually, I'm still going to try and tell us what the past is, just for the past 2 days. And I've also had about 17 cups of coffee today, and I'm speaking from my notes, so this is going to go great. Yeah. I'm so happy to have heard this previous panel because it said so much more succinctly some of the sort of advice part of what I've jotted down that I've learned in the last 2 days. So what I'm going to try to do actually is to just again like reconnect to some of the things we've touched on and see if we can connect those with some of the long-term trends that we're part of in the past 10 years, those still continue, and in what's coming next. And yes, we started with talking about the current market crunch, and it is clear that commissioning is going down. But I feel like we've learned in the last days a couple of things. We're not seeing the effects as radically in every European market, which is great. And also, actually, currently our slates remain surprisingly stable. Projects are being completed. And also because there have been financing delays on some projects that are coming out a little bit later than originally planned. So there's a huge volume for this year, 2024, coinciding with a slump in US content. And if Guy is to be believed, that offers more eyeballs, more evenings, and more sofas focused on all of these amazing things that we're bringing out this year. And I think still that there's some kind of opportunity for the broadcasters or the platforms in question to think about how to communicate these opportunities strategically. And of course, this huge sort of amount of content now has the effect of staggering our releases. So for the viewers, the effect of this commissioning crunch will probably be spread out instead of just some kind of weird overnight drop as the Americans are experiencing. Somebody said today, the market will regulate itself, which is a kind of code word for a lot of jobs are going to be gone and a lot of projects are not going to be made. And that is true. But at the same time, we've been saying the words unsustainable. It was unsustainable for us as humans and professionals to work in the way that we did. And there were these quality concerns as well. And again, I feel like there's been this sort of tone of relief that we can still be working. Thank God. We can be working, and we can be working better and smarter. We expect the market, the amount of shows, to stabilize at a lower level than the peak. But how else is this landscape, the map, how is it going to be different apart from some mountains being lower, right? And I'd like for us to stop just for a second, reflect on how the big changes of the last decade have affected the feature film space. Because we could say that that part of the industry was hit dramatically some years sooner than we were because of the physical limitations of theatrical exhibitions, of movie theater. So even if we discount the pandemic, we have been reminded in the last decade that just making more good films doesn't mean that they can actually be seen. You still have to get humans into theaters, and that has constraints of time and space and attention. And actually, that is kind of also true for television. But in cinema, because they have this direct measure of the box office and it's financially so important, the feature film industry mostly is quite aware of what the audience is engaging with. I'm saying mostly because, of course, we also have a dynamic with all of our selective support, especially for art house film in Europe, where there are some films that are at least partly disconnected from audience potential and audience success when it comes to whether they're getting made or not. And again, I'm not judging their quality. I'm just saying that that's not what we're measuring them on when we're greenlighting or not. And I think you could argue that there was a similar dynamic at a slightly sort of higher scale in play in television during the boom. Our focus shifted from getting this thing seen to getting all of the things made. And some shows were great, and they did great, and some shows were great, but were released in weird ways and underperformed, or maybe we don't know how they did, but usually if we don't know, they probably didn't do great. And a really great deal of mediocre things got made too, and let's just assume that most of the mediocre things did not get seen. But now we have this less hungry market, and it means that everybody has to pick and choose. And given the risks, as we've heard again and again, there's no reason to fund anything that, or make anything that you don't believe in fully. Everybody in the value chain is going to pick the things that they really believe will resonate and will be able to deliver on the quality it deserves. And the good news is that the TV industry, like compared to film historically, we've been the people who are great at audience relevance because we have that immediate feedback of ratings and or other ways of measuring this for streaming. Certainly the commissioners, at least, also at the streamers, they know how the project did. We're great at this, commissioners, producers, everybody. We're great at the audience. So yeah, returning to that focus, what should be made in that sense? What can we make, how can we make the audience sing our song? That's something we're really good at. And compared then to the situation maybe 5 years ago, is that in the meantime, all of us have leveled up in skills. In what Tatiana Samopyan yesterday referred to as the algebra of drama. I think Steve called it the mathematics, same thing. How to build it, and the skill in how to make it, everybody is better. In all of our markets, I think we're better at doing that now. And we have also learned something that maybe we've forgotten, but I just want to tell you, I'm from Finland, and historically our dramas did not travel. Ever. It was unthinkable. And now you know that even if you are, from, I wanted to say the armpit of Europe, but because that's how we viewed ourselves when I grew up, wherever you're from, your content can really go and your stories can really resonate. They just need to speak to the lives of the audience and be really clearly observed. So keeping the audience in mind, thinking about time and space and attention, just as we have been forced to do with feature films, this is how we're going to figure out what a sustainable level of production is like for TV drama. How many TV dramas can each of our markets carry? This is an industry, and it's not just the global streamers who are being asked to make their numbers work now, it's all of us. And just like more films didn't make box office grow linearly, yes, we know now that paying for more hours of premium drama does not linearly translate to profit or even necessarily viewership. So we have to correct back to business models that make sense. And some of those are tested and true. This, of course, means, for instance, that the streamers are just being integrated into some aspects of the old TV ecosystem. Licensing and windowing are coming back in a big way. And just the same on the producer side, our business logic needs to work. So it's more important than ever to be able to retain some IP to balance risks over time. All of that's really familiar. But it's also really important now to remember that we're not moving back to the old landscape. That's not what's happening here. The digital video platforms are still here. Media behaviors in the audience are changing radically, gradually, which is why we don't notice, but radically. And the underlying technologies even of TV distribution, especially of TV advertising, are evolving incredibly fast. And that's a process that's been ongoing gradually for 10 years, and we're still in that. So here too, actually, I think we can look at some of the changes the film industry has been through and see some interesting parallels that are worth thinking about going forward. I heard here, can't remember now which day it was, but somebody said, oh, we can absolutely get the highest, the most premium shows, we can get those funded, and you can get the most local shows funded. The middle is struggling. And I thought, oh, that's the same in theatrical, like the middle movies have gradually disappeared. They can't get funded because we can't connect, we can't place them right. Why do we have the same problem in TV? That's really worth thinking about. Yeah, so for film, the most fundamental change has been that there's no longer just like 1 or 2 or 3 paths to market. You have to put everything together from this really complex funding landscape based on who the audience is for your project and where their attention is directed. And ask yourself, is this a feature film at all? In the last 5 years, many filmmakers have said, no, I'm pretty sure it's actually television. And some of those projects were actually television. Not all of them. And of course, we have to ask ourselves the same questions, again, most centrally. What kind of series am I making? How should it be made? How expensively? I loved the example of Whiskey on the Rocks, which, when I interacted with it last, was a very serious drama for a broadcaster that was supposed to be shot in VP. And now it's this big, splashy satire, largely shot on sets in camera with Disney Plus on board. That can happen, and that's what the project was meant to be. So when you know who it's for and why you want to make it, and why you need to make it, because if you don't need to make it, probably don't make it right now. then there are still choices to be made about whom to work with and how expensively and what trade-offs you are willing to do for that investment. And again, the thing about retaining rights, not all trade-offs might be worth it. We've talked about commissioners collaborating across borders to offer real alternatives to, for instance, the global streamers, which is fantastic. Just as importantly, we have heard again and again in the last 2 days, co-production, creative collaboration. And again, regardless of who your windowing partners are, the creative collaboration between producers, also from countries that historically didn't need to. Suddenly that's something where everybody can win. And I loved that example from the European Writers Club, where something that starts as a creative collaboration will also lead to a financial partnership later on in the process. So there's a lot of money still around. A lot of it is patchwork, and we are having all of these complex incentives and international, national, regional, municipal, and here having more hands on a project and more brains on a project that know their local funding structures can really be helpful. I think things that need to get made will still get made, but getting to that point will take probably more hours, and that is going to be a struggle. It's persistence part, but I think it's going to pay off in quality too. Yeah. So just remember that audiovisual storytelling, including serial drama, exists in those new places as well, on the new platforms as well. And all of those platforms have business models. And if you're feeling squeezed in the traditional landscape, including the streamers, we have to expand our worldview to see what's coming next. The new platforms, if you ignore them, they will be our competition. But if you engage with them, they offer huge opportunities. There are things only broadcasters can do, and there are things only streamers can do. But delivering huge audiences is not exclusive to either of those kinds of partners. And other kinds of distribution partnerships can also allow you sometimes to retain more rights. Historically, this hasn't been a sustainable business for most companies like ours, I know. But if we are serious about thinking that production cost will drop radically, possibly even in the next few years, at least for some kinds of storytelling, wouldn't we want to be part of leveraging that in ways that make our businesses more sustainable? Which brings me back to AI. And the problem with discussing AI and how it will impact us is that seriously, I've been looking at this for over a year now, quite like deeply, and I still feel when I'm standing here like I'm making this up. Like it feels like I'm making claims, like I'm like, am I the asshole? Like, have I misunderstood something about what these technologies can do? So I just wanted to show a little bit of flavor for where prompted video is right now. Some of you probably saw this. This is the Google Lumiere demo, which was released 4 days ago. Has anyone seen it? Okay, no, you probably haven't. Great. So this, what we're going to see now is a somewhat different technology like the earlier market leaders like Runway and Pika. This one doesn't animate an image. It sort of generates movement sequences. And how much video AI can currently generate, like in a shot, is measured in frames. So stable video diffusion, for instance, does 25 frames of video it can generate. This one can do 80 frames at 16 per second. We're going to look at the clip. And when we do, just ask yourself, do not ask yourself, does this look entirely real? I don't think that's the right question. At this point, you should be asking yourself, how does this compare to CGI? Let's roll the clip, please. Yes, all right. So that's what it's looking like today, since, okay, then 4 days ago. So this is expected to become a mass market product later this year when it's released. So in other words, obviously it's not optimized for professional needs, but this gives an idea of where the field is right now. And it's really difficult to understand how fast this is moving, but I think we have all lived through a pandemic, and then we had to learn about like those hockey stick curves and what it means. So I think let's just like lean into that experience a little bit to try and understand how fast things can change also for us. So if we take that timeline seriously that we discussed in the panel yesterday, that we are 3 years, like maybe the progression is like good enough for online, like good enough for little GIFs or things where they're now good enough for advertising. We're actually starting to see generated video used there. Non-fiction, TV short formats, news studios, that kind of thing, graphics, absolutely, we're already there. Good enough for TV drama and good enough for feature film. I'm a little bit offended that people make this distinction, but you know what I mean. So people say for that 3 years from now or less. So let's just like take that timeline seriously for a second and think about what it means if we are less than 3 years from cinema quality prompted video. I mean, who is on that team? How do we prepare ourselves for working with it? Like the tools, either it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. But if it does happen and those tools are available, okay, one structure that can happen because of capitalism is that they just like force a lot of other tools kind of out of business and a lot of humans out of business, and then they make their tools incredibly expensive, but you're going to have to use them anyway. Like that's also a thing. But probably on average, certain things that used to be expensive and difficult are going to be cheaper and much easier, and we're going to want to use the tools. And 3 years from now, a lot of the legal uncertainties will probably also be fixed. So I think we only need to think about now moving ahead. What do we need to learn today to be stay abreast of this process? What do we need to explore today? What do we need to be humble about not knowing today? What do we need to be proud about knowing what to do today? And how do we retain those bits that we're proud about? And how do we keep curiosity and learn and try, maybe if fear is in the picture, as it tends to be, how do we balance like fear and opportunity? To start to maybe dream a little bit about like, what could I make with this kind of a thing? How will you work with yourself, your processes, your creatives, to make sure that all of your work is based on life, grounded in life? Tatiana said very wisely in her lecture yesterday that almost all drama is in some ways derivative, but what it cannot be now is derivative in its perspective on life, in its groundedness in life. That is something, that's how Steve is different from the software, is that Steve needs to meet the human, the writer on a human level. Tatiana summarized it as writers will need to be experiencers first, then explorers, and only then writers. And I think that might be true for all of us. We need to be experiencers and explorers, and then we make the drama that will resonate from that. So if I would have to guess, why isn't Google releasing this immediately for everybody if they have the technology? I would guess that there are 2 answers. One is that the process to set the guardrails in to stop, because that thing can make anything, like it can animate any kind of image. So they have to put in like guardrails that if you're asking for things that are incredibly offensive, that it's not going to output them, and that's just a very complicated and time-consuming process. But also, this is a year when 40% of the world's population will vote in an election. I'm sure if one of their competitors releases something as good, this is going to be out as well. Like, let's not be naive. But I think we're all sort of standing on the brakes, pumping the brakes a little bit about what the next kind of future is going to be. Storytelling, as Katarina reminded us, is a battleground for freedom. And storytelling is very much a battleground for democracy. Storytelling is a source of hope and of community. And as the panelists said, guys, we get to tell stories, like we get to be part of that. Isn't that amazing? And I think that anybody who watched Katarina's trailer is taking away also that standing, and she said so beautifully also about the Nordic countries, standing for stories that need to be told is an enormous privilege in the world. And let's never forget that. And at the same time, providing escape and entertainment and consolement and community and hope is something that great storytelling can do. And I am convinced that it's something that great storytelling will do. That's also in some ways what the market will demand. The human experience is going to be more valuable than ever, and who has more of that than, you know, people. So that's where I am right now. I'm going to digest all of this for a couple of months and then write the Nostradamus Report and release it in Cannes. So if you want to tell me things about the future, please get in touch. And for now, I will also say thank you for this year. I have learned so much. It's a privilege to be in this room with all of you. Sia, welcome to the stage. Thank you.